And we're live. Actually, we forgot the countdown timer today. That just shows how rusty I am because we haven't been doing many live streams lately. But let's just say I'm so excited to be back. I know I've said this before, but I'm making a real effort to do this more consistently. Those who my story know that I've been building a community and company called Grateful Giraffes. It's taking a lot of my time. It's going exceptionally well. Still, no guarantees in the startup world, no guarantees of success. But right now, our trajectory is positive. We're impacting lives, and I'm extremely excited for everything I'm working on. If there's one thing that I feel like I'm not being fulfilled in my current job, it's this work. It's reconciliation between people. It's that level of intellectual stimulation that comes with it. So I'm grateful to be back. Those tuning in, let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. Today we're here with Malkon and I'm excited to have you back, brother. It's been, I guess, over a year since you've been on the show. We're going to talk about reconciliation, but more so honing in on the topic of should we recognize the mistakes and mistakes of our ancestors and apologize for those mistakes. Before we get started, Malkon, I do want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself so the audience knows a little bit more about you. So the floor is yours, brother.
Thank you, Adar, for the beautiful words. Okay, my name is Malkon, and in short, I come from a mixed background, Armenian, Egyptian, Aramaic, Palestinian. So I'm a Palestinian, in short, from Jerusalem. And relating to the topic today, I have a master's degree in human rights and international law, and I have another degree also in biblical history, prophecy, and philosophy. I have my first degree in psychology. But just to relate to what we're gonna do, so we're gonna address certain topics to do also with biblical history. That's why I mentioned the biblical part. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Malkon. I forgot to mention, I do want to shout out our Patreon visionary subscribers. We have Matthew Coggins and Renee Gordon. And honestly, they deserve a very special thanks because we haven't been active and they've kept their Patreon active. And to all the other patrons that have remained active with us the past year or so of inactivity, if you do want to support the show, if you want to help me support sending my future children to college, you can find a link on, no guarantee I have children, but if I do, they will go to college. Well, their father didn't, so who knows? But you can find a link in the description. And yeah, we really are making an effort to get back on a weekly basis. We have another live stream scheduled for next week, so the consistency is cool. Malkon, I'm going to let you open up with this. This is a topic that I know is very important to you. You know, how do you feel about us acknowledging the wrongdoings of our ancestors? And the question is not only do you think Israelis should acknowledge the wrongdoings of their ancestors, but do you think Palestinians should as well?
Yeah, so speaking of the wrongdoing, yes, okay, thank you for allowing me to start. In the same way that I believe anyone belongs to their family. Let's say I have a father and a mother. They're very far from being perfect. In the same way I relate to their good parenting, I should relate also to their bad parenting and acknowledge it. Not just only acknowledge the good part. This is how I relate in very short, the analogy to anything to do with people groups. They are our family, historically, ancestrally, our ancestral family, and that's how we belong. Let's take the Armenians, because I'm Armenian also. So Armenians historically once conquered Palestine back in 47 BC. Am I proud that they conquered Palestine personally? No, because that was conquering. And I acknowledge it as something that is not cool. Even if other Armenians see it as, wow, it's widening the kingdom back then, and whatever, we call it at the time of Tigran Metz. Metz means the great. Tigran the Great, our king. So anything to do with conquering, for example. But Armenians have a genocide, so I don't only recognize the genocide, I also recognize the faults of the Armenians. I gave a very small example. In the same way, any people groups, Palestinians, Israelis, Jewish, Arab, should recognize whatever is positive in history should be recognizable. Whatever is not positive should be also recognized. And this is part of being just and fair and real and genuine, authentic, not just biased. And that's in short. But you said to me, this means a lot to me because it relates to the context of the hot topic where me and you were thinking of talking about this. Actually, you wanted to address it in a public thing. I was just discussing it with you, which I thank you for it. When I said, because I expressed it to different Jewish people, Israelis, but not only Israelis or Jewish people. When I say, well, we are persecuted as Christians of the Middle East by Jewish people in Israel today, and not only do Jewish people or don't Jewish people recognize that, usually they don't, but they don't recognize that they first persecuted the first ever believers in Jesus Christ and Jesus himself, the founder of Christianity. So out of responsibility of Jewish people who carry a Holocaust, unfortunately they are an oppressive group in Israel, mainly. Not every person, I'm speaking about the Jewish people who are involved in the Israeli society, Israeli army, etc. Not every person again, but majority, vast majority. Still, they are speaking about their suffering and their victimhood. Yet, when even Germany recognized the Holocaust, which is amazing to recognize someone else's, they recognize, they admit it, they apologize, they try and still try to compensate, regardless of the details of that. Yet, we don't have any Jewish people ever stand up saying, oh, sorry to the Christians, yes, we were persecuted by you throughout history, but we also persecuted you. We apologize for killing your founder, for killing the first believers, for trying to persecute them alive, kill them for their faith. That's first century. So this is, in a nutshell, why this is important, because it brings authenticity to a call of justice. Anybody who calls for justice should recognize their own injustices, especially the known injustices. There are many things we don't know, and it's endless. But at least the things we know, we should not cover up. We are responsible for what we know.
Cool. Thank you, Malkon. I think there's probably some areas of agreement between us, and I'm happy to start there. I think that on a philosophical level, I don't think blame and guilt carries from generation to generation. So I don't think that the offspring of anyone is guilty or responsible for the actions of their ancestors in any way, shape, or form. That being said, if we look at things through the lens of making progress and reconciliation, I do see the power of apology and acknowledging wrongdoing. Even if I myself, as an Israeli, am not guilty for anything those living prior to me have done, if me acknowledging that my ancestors have done wrong would make you feel better about living side by side with Israelis, then I would view that as a useful tool for us to reconcile, and then I'd be willing to do that. So I think there is some agreement in us recognizing the power of acknowledging of wrongdoing and/or an apology. When it comes to Jesus Christ, here's where things I think we differ quite a bit. First of all, it was so many thousands of years ago that I feel like to hold on to any form of resentment so many generations later and expect a people after thousands of years, and by the way, thousands of years where they were persecuted and held responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. So it's not like, you want an apology, but the action of a very few Jewish leaders, as some historians would say, and as theology would say, it wasn't like the entire Jewish community. It's a few Jewish leaders made an action which contributed to the Romans killing Jesus. That resulted in thousands of years of Christian persecution and violence against Jews. And for 2,000 years later to now say, you still need to apologize, to me, it doesn't really add up. You know, I struggle to see why that would still be important. I feel like we could just kind of put this behind us and move forward as brothers and sisters. And then from a theological perspective, and this is, I pose a question to you because I'm agnostic, but the, at least as it's viewed theologically, is Jesus was destined to die, and he was killed for the sins of those living at the time. So it was, it shouldn't be the fault of those who contributed to his death. It was destined that that would be the case, and Christianity only exists because Jesus was killed, as God destined for it to be. So why would that be something worth apologizing for when that was the intention of God from the get-go? So I pose you, I push back from two perspectives: the theological one, which I'm interested in, but as an agnostic, I care less about. The other is more so, why do you think that an entire population should apologize thousands of years after the actions of a few members of their tribe? Even more so, the fact that they got punished for that action for thousands of years. So, I struggle with that perspective.
Sure, I hear you, Adar.
Mm-hmm.
First, I think, as I was discussing with you on phone, that you're using terms that I'm not promoting. You're using also an analogy or a request that I'm not also asking for. I'm neither asking anybody to be put at fault, nor anybody carry guilt. Neither anybody should be feeling, oh, they are responsible. It's all, unfortunately, to say, unintentionally, what you're doing is you're using an argument that would make your argument sounds positive and more logically sounding to people, and makes my words sound, oh, what is he talking about? Okay, so let me rephrase what I'm saying.
Cool.
I gave the option of the family, brother. I'm the grandson of the grandson of the grandson of the grandson of blah, 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 etc. Somebody who once was a criminal. Wouldn't it be noble when somebody mentions that criminal person for me to acknowledge it? Because I'm the grandson of the grandson of the grandson related to that criminal. So
I think
acknowledging, allow me just, acknowledging that it is a mistake, that this was a crime. Not acknowledging I should be guilty or maybe I should pay something, even emotionally. Rather, acknowledging, sympathizing that it's not because I owe somebody anything, because we owe love to each other, nothing else. So to owe love is to say, yes, my very, very, very whatever great grandfather actually killed this person that was dear to your people group a few thousand years ago or a few hundred years ago. This would simply show, first, love. Care about the person that's speaking to you. Second, you're speaking about why a whole people group, they paid it because Christian persecution, very irrelevant. Christian persecution with the Jewish people is very well acknowledged by Christians. Not by all Christians, but very well acknowledged by many Christians. Even the non-Christian German, Nazi Germany, acknowledged the Holocaust. And by the way, do Germans need to acknowledge the Holocaust? Because they were not responsible for the Holocaust, not all of them.
correct.
So shall we say, okay, they should dismiss it and forget the past? Also, you put the word resentment into my mouth, and I, again, unintentional. By the way, I don't really believe in the spirit of debate. If debate means an argument, I don't believe in it. I
We're
believe
having a respectful conversation on our
yes,
similarities and differences.
of course, of course. I believe in the spirit of a discussion. But you can, of course, what you're presenting here may come across provocative, and that's okay. What I'm trying to say, I don't hear that now Adar is trying to understand Malkon. Rather, he's putting words maybe to bring an argument to the audience that's maybe healthy here. But what I'm trying to say is, what I'm saying is, maybe for me, it's pretty clear, simple. Has nothing to do with guilt versus anybody taking revenge versus fault versus no. If it's what I'm saying is simple, humble, loving sympathy toward every human. If any Armenian ever hurt anybody who's not Armenian, I would apologize for my Armenian people on behalf, even if it's generations ago, even if it's thousands of years ago. Not because the other person is presenting a resentful, emotional, immature reaction. No, they are seeking truth of the sound of justice. Justice means truth, not revenge. Doesn't mean judgment and judgmentalism against a certain people group. It means truth of what happened. Like we Palestinians ask the Jews for the truth against Palestinians of what Israel has been doing and still doing today against the Christians of Palestine today. They spit at our cross, at our clergymen, and so on, laymen, and so on and so forth. We seek the truth. We don't seek revenge. If I'm a true Christian, as Jesus says, love your enemies. So love does not mean revenge. It means truthfulness. If I love my even children and they're abusing somebody else, love means I should set boundaries to my children. I should rebuke my children. That's what love in this case would mean. It would mean justice, not revenge of my children. I'm not trying to beat my children up in front of those that they were abusing so that the others, the victims, may feel better. Rather, to stop my children of being abusive and teach them how to be rather humane humans. So this is more or less what I'm trying to say, Adar. It's nothing to do with this, Christians already took revenge of this, so the Jews don't need to speak about that. I can address the theology if you want or later, but this is basically in regards to the major point of the human aspect, being an agnostic yourself. Respecting people, Jewish people who claim, you're telling me thousands of years you should forget. Why didn't the Jews forget about the thousands of years of this land? It still claim that it's theirs. And God gave it to them. And just claiming a physical land. Please dismiss that based on the facing blood and killing each other for it. Whereas Jesus was in the past. And by the way, nobody of Christianity claims that anybody should be held responsible for the killing of Jesus. But to recognize who killed him should not be denied or manipulated. That's all. That's not that the Jewish people should be held responsible, etc. But that brings us to the theological perspective. In short, humanity killed God because he came to love and sacrifices himself for humanity. So humanity is all guilty of killing God, but not guilty in the sense of should be held and judged. Rather, guilty of the sense of he died for us so that we can live freely. This is the spiritual concept here of him. But who physically, historically, asked for this death? A bunch of a few Jewish leaders at the time. Sure, the Sanhedrin, and that's okay. That doesn't make the Jewish people the worst, or any other people would have done maybe the same or worse. Not recognizing it is the problem. Okay? As I would object to Germany not recognizing abusing or Western Christianity not abusing even Eastern Christianity. Or Ottomans not abusing Armenians, or also Ottomans that abusing Aramaics, or also Ottomans that abusing Greeks, because Ottomans abused a lot of people. But anyway, that's just a self-centered.
I think I think I understand a way to relieve some of this tension here. So I think one of the reasons why many Jews would resist to what you're saying and the acknowledging of their contribution to Jesus's death is because Jewish contribution to Jesus's death caused it really, that was the start to Christian anti-Semitism, which continues until today. Now, it's almost like, wouldn't you recognize that it would be very hard for Palestinians to apologize to Israelis given the state of the conflict and given they are constantly on they're getting the worst end of the deal, and they're the ones that are living under another nation's military rule, that in that state of like an oppressed mindset, it's very hard to apologize and acknowledge that you did anything wrong when you yourself are victimized by another side. So I think how many Jews see it, it's like you want us to acknowledge and talk about something that we're continuously blamed and punished for. What I do think, though, I think that if you were to have a conversation with like most Jews would be able to say, yeah, you know what, maybe Jewish leaders shouldn't have turned Jesus into the Romans. I don't think most Jews would object to that. I think if you say, do you take responsibility? Would you apologize? You would get resistance there. But I think if you come from a compassionate perspective and say, yeah, this is as history has it. Some Jewish leaders turned Jesus into the Romans. The Romans killed Jesus. Do you acknowledge that as a historical fact? I don't think most Jews would deny that, right? So if that's all you're looking for, I think it wouldn't be hard to get Jews to acknowledge that. I think that most Jews and people in general wouldn't understand the importance of it, because Christian and Jewish relations right now are actually quite well. It's not something at the front of our mind, not on Christian minds, not on Jewish minds. It's kind of, for the most part, put behind us. That said, this legacy of contributing to Jesus's death still is used by anti-Semites to hate us. So there's a sensitivity around it. So I think, on one hand, having Jews acknowledge the historical fact that Jesus was killed partially due to some Jewish leaders, I don't think you'll have many Jews denying that. If you want Jews to acknowledge wrongdoing and apologize, I think there will be resistance, A, because they feel like they're not responsible so many years later, and B, they've understood the implications of that blame the past few thousand years.
I hear you. There's truth to what you're saying, definitely. On one hand, Adar, most Jews, I don't have statistics, most Jews I have met, which is very little, don't even know anything about Jesus.
Correct.
Okay. So to say most Jews would not deny is not very accurate either, because lack of knowledge is another level of dismissal. Like most Turkish people I meet don't know anything about Armenian genocide. So it doesn't mean that they don't deny it.
But lack of knowledge is not a form of denial. Like if you were to say, if you're having a conversation with a Jew, and it's not like in an accusatory way, but you're just saying, yeah, did you know the history of Jesus, and that he was in conflict with the Jewish establishment, and Jewish leaders turned him over to the Romans, and the Romans crucified them? I don't think you're going to get as much resistance as you think. Someone's going to be, oh, I didn't know that. Some might say, yeah, I did know that. And others might get defensive, but I don't think it's going to be an overwhelming amount of Jews getting defensive over acknowledging a historical fact. It would either be they're unaware because we're not taught it, or they would acknowledge it's true, for the most part.
I hear you. But I'm saying, putting that aside, recognizing it's not about one person. Recognizing a process of persecution against Christians by Jewish people in the first century. The Jewish leadership was persecuting the church so heavily that the church, according to history, almost vanished in the Holy Land, almost ceased to exist. That's how much persecution was there. It wasn't, it's Jesus guy who sacrificed himself anyway theologically. So, no. And also until today, Eastern Christians are persecuted by Jewish people today within Israel. So when I personally today, 2,000 years after, because you're saying it's years, thousands of years ago, so let's dismiss it. When I am here persecuted by the Jews who themselves claim that this is their land, etc., and connecting the thousands of years back, and then they are persecuting the same Christians who they persecuted in the first century, who never persecuted them, by the way, because it's not Eastern Christians who persecuted the Jews, it's Western Christians, which is shameful, because it's the same spiritual family. But Western Christianity also persecuted Eastern Christianity. But aside from that, I'm saying Eastern Christians have been always persecuted by the Jewish people here or different people groups here. And yet we are not claiming self-centered approach of, but other persecute. We're saying about recognition. Because they persecuted us, you expect us, because we're victims, like Palestinians, to apologize for Israel. Because Western Christianity today, brother, if you tell me anti-Semitism is active, I would definitely argue this is a very self-centered Jewish victim propaganda. Sorry to tell you, nobody today in general is severely, heavily killing Jews for being Jews anywhere, everywhere they find them, etc. Any racism, discrimination, and mistreatment of other people, minorities, other people groups all over the world happens and occurs. Whether it's against sexual minority, against women, against Druze, against Yazidis, against even some Muslims in Europe report being abused for being minority, against Christians in the Middle East, because where any minority anywhere suffers. To call this, we are the victims, so now Western Christianity, whatever, and bring it here, then they say, the Jews, but it's between Islam and Judaism. Those Muslims are the terrorists. And they everywhere the Jewish people go, they claim to be the victims, even when they are the oppressors openly here, obviously, and the ones in power. So, which you don't disagree with me on some parts of what I'm saying, maybe in regards to the reality here. But what I'm trying to say is this Jewish-centered approach, which I am personally, I feel, to say the least, disgusted by. Because that's a victim mentality of thousands of years ago until today, and claiming still to be victims, despite the abuses of others. Utter hypocrisy of being a victim. And this is what's happening in the Jewish mind. You saying, but Western, no, Israel abuses me today on a daily basis. How can you compare this to anti-Semitism, where anybody today is facing like a policy, no freedom of movement, Palestinians cannot intermarry because they're Palestinian, Palestinians cannot build their house because they're, Palestinians cannot travel because, Palestinians have their houses demolished because, where is this happening to Jewish people by Western Christians today? And to compare it and say, we are still in the victim like the Western Christianity, and so to recognize the killing of Jesus would put us in, I understand there is a psychology to that today, but it's based on a bit of manipulation, because Jews today are not the victims of Western Christianity. Rather, we are today the victims of a Zionist Christian theology, believing that Jews have to be here in order to Jesus to come back. It attacks me first, this Western version, especially in the US, called Zionist Christianity. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think what would help you better accept what you call as Jewish victimhood is maybe an acknowledgement that it's not a competition, that a Jew can be both an oppressor and a victim. Both things can hold true. So I know you said you're disgusted by it, but I think this would be a place where empathy would go a long way. Now, I actually also have critiques on this. I think one of the things that are holding both Jews and Palestinians back is that there's a very strong sense of victimhood, and I think that generally speaking is counter to being to being an empowered individual, to having agency over your life and your actions. So I would like for both our people to rise up out of our victim mindset. That being said, to entirely dismiss any Jewish concern and any form of Jewish victimhood as just made up or self-centered, I think that's not a productive approach. You don't need to be killed and oppressed by another government to be a victim of hate. The number one ethnic group that is targeted by hate crimes in the United States happen to be Jews. If you look at which ethnic group is the most attacked on social media, it also happens to be Jews. Now, again, there's a distinction between being attacked verbally and physically, I agree, but nobody wants to be attacked for who they are indiscriminately. And any individual has the right to complain about being discriminated against or attacked for who they are, regardless of what the Israeli government does to Palestinians. So I think two things can be true. The Israeli government oppresses Palestinians, and Jews are still victimized by anti-Semitism. It doesn't need to be one or the other. It's not one at the expense of the other. And to take it a layer deeper, I know many Palestinians, they kind of laugh. They're like, or they're baffled at how Israel could view themselves as victims when they're so much more powerful than Palestinians. But it's because we don't only look at it as how much power we have compared to Palestinians. We look at it as how can we survive in our tiny land in a sea of enemies, essentially. And there's no guarantee in Israel's survival, and there's no guarantee that Israel can continue to remain safe for Jews for for an extended period of time. They're very well, we've experienced terror attacks. Every Israeli has lost friends to this conflict. I personally have lost 4 friends. I'm of the powerful side, but I have lost 4 friends. Does that not account for anything? Can I guarantee that my children and grandchildren can safely live in the land of Israel? No. Can I guarantee that there won't be a nuclear attack? No. So all this understanding that our future is not guaranteed to be safe can contribute to a mindset of victimhood, regardless of if we are the powerful ones or not. Right? So on one hand, Jews, both in Israel and around the world, have every right to be disturbed by anti-Semitic remarks or attacks. And Jews in Israel also have concern given the instability of the future of their nation. Now, all of this does not take away from what Palestinians experience every day and the future Palestinians deserve to achieve, right? So these two truths can simultaneously be true. And I believe in order to reconcile, we need to hold both these truths.
I agree with you, Adar. I'll start with what I agree with. Of course, any person, oppressor or oppressed, can both be an oppressor and oppressed at the same time. For example, a thief is not only an oppressor. Maybe somebody stole from him, or they had their own theft issues, or they faced their own abuse, and they were hurt. Somebody who hurts others have been hurt. Yes, those two things can coexist. I'm speaking about the hypocrisy of speaking mainly as if we are victims. This is shameful. A Jew today speaking mainly as if they are victims, if they are in Israel in particular, is manipulative to say the least. Way worse than that, in my opinion. But to say the least, it's manipulative because it's psychological, it's emotional manipulation. Okay? Unintentional, maybe. It's not that I'm criminalizing people now and saying, demonizing, oh, they're deeply, intentionally, awareingly criminals trying to. But to us, they are walking as criminals, living as criminals when they join an army that kills children and destroys our life on a daily basis, and they're unaware of it. Or some of them, or most of them, are aware of it. To speak about one's own suffering has its place. I speak of how people persecuted Jewish people. I can freely speak about how Jews were persecuted because I'm not biased against Jews or for somebody else. I'm biased for justice, truth. So I'm not afraid if Jews have suffering or not. There's no competition. What you're bringing your argument into, and assuming I'm saying, unfortunately, if I'm coming across this way, I'll learn to change and rephrase myself. But I don't believe in this shallow approach of competition, emotional competition of victim. I come from very, very victimized, oppressed background. Does it mean that I'm always the oppressor, the oppressed only? I've been an oppressor in my life every single day. The moment I make somebody feel hurt, disrespected, offended, if I'm ever unkind to anybody, even to an enemy who's rightly there abusing it, any reaction that holds unkindness, lack of love, or hatefulness is a certain oppression of me, even if it's towards an oppressor who initiated even oppression towards me. That's how I approach it. That's how I believe in. Because this is how I believe Christianity teaches. And I believe in Christianity. I believe in the love of Jesus that died for his enemies while he was on the cross. He said, "Oh, forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they're doing." He did not say, "Oh, let me be unkind for a while because they're killing me, so they deserve it." No. So definitely the oppressor can be Palestinians who go ahead and kill or stab or whatever any Israelis. For me, this is a crime. Or this is, even if it's coming from resistance, even if we are the ones retaliating, even if we are the ones with less power, this is a completely unjust killing. And even if we don't see him as innocent, but for me, still a human, killing another human or innocent human Israeli, or just a child, or just a woman, or just under the umbrella of liberating Palestine, for me is, of course, hypocritical Palestinian way of saying, because I don't believe in violence, but I have Palestinians who disagree with me. No, but we have the right, even international law gives us the right to resist occupation. Anyway, this is an argument. What I'm saying, my approach, I don't believe that this is right. So yes, Palestinians sometimes are oppressors, but mainly the oppressed in regards to power and policies and laws. Israelis many times are oppressed, but mainly the oppressor. Because of their governments, they have the power, the decision-making power, and so on and so forth. So this is how we deal. Even a simple analogy that I mention in most of my time when I guide people as a geopolitical tour guide, I say to them, assume there's a big guy with muscles, and two children are in the street and they got into a fight. Who gets the blame if both go into the fight? The two children with the muscular guy. Who gets the blame, the more responsible? The muscular guy or the two children? Of course, the muscular guy. Or maybe people have different opinions. Who gets more blame? I'm saying more responsibility. I'm saying because the muscular guy can break them in half if he wants. So he gets more responsibility to stop, cease, or continue the conflict. Whereas the children are less able to do all of those elements. They might just feel attacked and they might throw stones as a result to that, and they may look more savage than this muscular civil guy who's maybe dressed up in an army form. So, but the one who's muscular, who has more power, is held more responsible. So to address, and it saddens me, Adar, not to make you personally feel bad, but it saddens me that an Israeli would say, who would feel safe in Israel? Very hypocritical. What do you mean who would feel safe in Israel? Israel is committing crimes. Of course you shouldn't be feeling safe in Israel because it's an oppressive, criminal regime. It will not bring you safety. It will bring you unfortunate, inhumane responses because it is acting continuously inhumanely. Why would somebody choose to say, I want to live here in safety because I'm not to make it into this victim scenario, but I'm not guaranteeing a safety for Israel around enemies. When you create enemies actively and you don't want peace, actively you're refusing to give Palestinians their own sovereignty. And to even have, in 2002, 2003, there was the Arab Summit, and they said, we will all recognize Israel, just allow the Palestinians to have sovereign state on the 67 borders. Israel says no. From 1976, Israel and the US says no. So they're openly saying no, although it's an argument also. Israelis say that we are saying no. It gets funny. But to say no and then promote yourself as this victim, and I'm not speaking about Adar, but in this statement, this sentiment, as this victim, oh, we are, look, there's enemies, mentioning that. undermines the argument of Israelis. It makes it it puts you guys in the umbrella of hypocrisy, manipulation, lies, propaganda. It doesn't put you in an authentic manner of defending justice. If this is the major argument, I'm saying, it's not like you can never mention it, but it's the way you're mentioning it. But now, when we're addressing me and you, this argument, maybe this is the context you want to say this. Maybe this is the right context. But for me, if we want to address justice, the right anything to do with justice, for my humble understanding, and correct me, and I'm open to be challenged by any person, because this is the I'm most passionate about. Justice means liberating and stopping the abuse of the oppressed and the weaker. First and foremost, and mainly, not thinking of the oppressor's psychology and how they were back in history. This has its time and it's legitimate. It's some even spiritual groups would say definitely we should think of the rapist, why he's rapist. Of course, I'm all for it. This is the concept of loving an enemy. It's loving. Who are they? Why are they acting like this? But mainly when we're speaking about justice and imminent, emergent stop of children, Palestinians being killed, and I'm mentioning Palestinians because they are the main victims of that death and criminal regime of Israel. This is mainly should be the focus. Let's stop that criminal regime. Not the focus, okay, how do Israelis feel, etc. Because reconciliation means we are both equal. Yes, we are equal in.
So Malkon,
you brought up equal in roles and responsibilities.
You brought up a lot of points. So just so we could organize,
I want you to remember, if you want to, we are equal in dignity and value as humans. We're not equal in responsibility, brother. You have way more responsibility to stop and shout out against your own government and against your own abuses, not personal abuses, Israeli abuses, as opposed to me as a Palestinian, although I also have. But you have way more responsibility to focus on that than me focusing on the Palestinian abuses of Israelis. I have to focus on Palestinians being abused to be stopped from being abused. Because that's reality. If you deny this reality, this is another discussion that we need to go into. That's then the discussion. As opposed to the concept of Jesus, etc., which was the initial conversation. Please.
Thanks. So there's a few points, and I want to try to address them in a way that doesn't make this conversation super unorganized. But you, on one hand, acknowledge that you could see how Jews and Israelis can view themselves as victims in certain contexts, but you still view it as manipulation. Is what you're saying that you just don't agree that them taking actions against Palestinians in the name of their victimhood, is that what you're taking issue with? So you're saying I have no issue with Jews describing themselves as victims in some situations, but to use that as an action against my people is unacceptable. And I'd like if you could just respond in a yes or no, it would be easy to move on to the next thing. Is that what you're saying, or you're saying that any acknowledgement of victimhood or oppression on the Jewish, like of us being victimized or oppressed, you just don't accept?
It's the use of it. Continue and I will elaborate.
It's what actions that result in. Okay, cool. So fine. I think we're in agreement there. We could see that both sides can feel like victims. Both sides can feel fear and in danger simultaneously. You just don't support what actions Israel takes to protect themselves. I think we're in agreement here. I do want to push back a little bit on the analogy. Not that this is the most important, but I do hear it used. You talk about the muscular guy and the two children. And by the way, there's a leaf blower in the background. Can you guys hear me well, or can you guys hear the leaf blower? Chat, let me know.
You well. There is,
okay, cool. It's distracting me, but as long as it's not distracting you, we'll be okay.
No, I can't. Yeah.
So analogies are great. It's like a simple way to make a statement or prove a point, but they break down in certain regards. So I struggle with that analogy because I think it's a mistake to infantilize Palestinians. I think, as I mentioned earlier, one of the best ways to lift our people up is to have agency and to view Palestinians as two weak children. It allows Palestinians to feel like no matter what action they take, they're not responsible because they're like children. And this is something that the West, many Western social justice activists impose on oppressed people, and I think it's counter to their own to their own empowerment. So I struggle in that regard. And it's also not as simple as a muscular man against two children. Let's say those two children, they can't beat the muscular man, but they would go and kill that muscular man's daughter. Are they responsible for that? Right. So it's when you have a muscular man against two children, the muscular man can't get hurt. But we have a conflict here where actual children on both sides and victims on both sides are being killed. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. So that's just my thoughts on that example and why I don't love it. The third point was regarding you said, of course, Jews are in danger because we are because of how we are acting. Okay. And you know me, anyone who's watched this channel knows I'm very critical of the Israeli government and many policies. But is there any action that Israel can take that would actually make all Jews safe and that it could be guaranteed? And if you really know what that looks like, what Israel can do to ensure Jewish safety, then I'd love to hear, because this is something that I've spent many, many hours reflecting on. Other Israelis and Jews have reflected on this. And if there was a simple way, actions Jews can take or Israel can take to ensure Jewish safety in the land of Israel, then there'd be a lot more dialogue about what can happen. But where we are right now, it's the status quo, maintaining the status quo, which will continuously produce more violence and continuously radicalize the Palestinian people, not denying that. And that the radicalization of the Palestinian people and the violence that ensues does harm Jews. I agree. But the alternative, changing the status quo, there's many different variations of what that look like, and very few of them, or maybe none of them actually, guarantee Jewish safety. So I'm interested in hearing from you what you think Israel can do to ensure Jews are safe on the land.
Sure, I'll address that second, but just to speak about analogy about quickly, muscular guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
First, there's no perfect analogy. This is not an identical situation of Palestine and Israel. Those analogies are to address a certain element, which is very crucial, which is what we call in international law proportionality, the law of proportionality, the power difference. Somebody has more power, held more responsible. A baby is not held as responsible as the mother when it comes to who takes care of who.
Okay? I agree. I just think we could express that without an analogy. Like, look, Israel has more power. With power comes responsibility. You know, as whatever Spider-Man's uncle said, you know, we get that. That's part of culture. We understand it. So I just think there's a way more straightforward to get that point across. So that's just, as a friend, feedback on how to convey a message, you know.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
Why do I disagree? First, you're undermining the message. And you're making it sound like it's shallow, which I don't enjoy, but I'm engaging, I'm humble, I'm happy to engage. It's the honor to engage with you in a conversation. But it does feel shallow. To say that this analogy should not, no, you should do it in a direct, no, I disagree. People understand through stories and analogy. This is how our psychology works. Speaking of, I wish Israel understand that they have more power, meaning more responsibility. Well, yes, I think they do understand they have more responsibility to kill more, destroy more. Yes, that's how far they understand the responsibility. So, but for me, they need more analogies maybe to wake up. When I give them such analogies, no, it doesn't apply. Because everybody is running away, especially those who are held responsible. They're running away from responsibility, like me. I'm myself as a human. If somebody wants to hold me responsible for something I did wrong, my first reaction, if I'm immature, which I can be many times, to defend myself. And if I'm a bit mature later, one day, or at some point, or some hour, some minute, okay, let me recognize, let me think about it, I apologize, take responsibility. If I'm not mature at all, I would deny it fully, continue to deny it. So this is what we're speaking about. It's emotional maturity, even what you mentioned before, about how to deal with victimhood, etc., although you agreed with, it's emotional maturity. Manipulation is a part of emotional unintelligence. but it's intentional many times, because it's coming from a place of fear and a place of, I want to look right and the other is bad. So it's not truthful. It's about me to be right. The truth is not right or wrong. The truth is the fact. Doesn't matter who is right or wrong. The truth is the truth. And that's what objectivity is, supposedly. For example, for me, the truth is a person, originally. It's a creator of life. It's the founder of everybody. This is the truth in Christian thought. The truth is, that's why Jesus said, I am the truth. Because there is no fault. There is no manipulation there. There is no trying to say the truth is my opinions are right. No, the truth is a person of love. And this is the concept. The truth is love. So love is the truth, and love sets us free. So this is where I'm coming from. To move into, so analogy hopefully can bring us into more sympathetic love of each other and towards each other. So it's not a perfect analogy.
Yeah,
Africa, to end with that, to bring South Africa as an example of Palestine, Israel, apartheid, it's not identical, but we use it again as an analogy, as an example.
Well,
there exists elements of, so to keep saying, oh, but it's not perfect, I don't like that because it doesn't, like I give the rapist and the rape, they tell me, what? No, Israel is rapist and Palestine is raped, no way. And then you're blaming the woman who's being raped, of you're being a victim, and you're not empowering them for their agency. She needs years of, not decades, if not her whole life of healing to become an agent again of her own life. That's how much abuse can harm our psychology. I'm all for bringing up my people. That's why I dance for human rights. I want my Palestinians to dance for joy and not being away from this victim mentality that the occupation keeps bringing them. They're not even given, there's no law in Israel says for entertainment and joy and happiness, Palestinians can have a permit to come to Israel. Nothing like that. It's either hospitalization or work or death. And a few other reasons, but there's no joy, entertainment, happiness, expression, freedom, art. There's no reasons like that. So Palestinians, what I'm doing in our project of dancing is to bring them, Palestinians, the agency of, hey, dance. Freedom of movement is not allowed to you by Israel. Let's dance and freely move at least our bodies to express our joy, because there's more hope to this life than this occupation. So definitely I believe in bringing up our agency and to be away from victim mentality, destroy victim mentality in our Palestinian mindset. There's a whole different Palestinian struggle. But when I address an Israeli on platform like this, I need to address the Israeli abuses. To Palestinians, I will address the Palestinian abuses.
Malkon, real quick.
But I come from that much. Go ahead.
Real quick. I don't want us to get stuck on the analogy, but the reason why I think this is important is because our ability to reconcile is dependent on our ability to communicate effectively. And I agree, no analogy is perfect, but some are just completely ineffective. And I view this as one of those. And I'm telling you this as somebody who's a communicator. I want you to be able to better communicate with Israelis. There are certain statements and analogies that might resonate with your own people, right? They're like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, we're the two children. They're the muscular guy. We get it. But if you want to convince the other side, it's worth reflecting on the language that is used and the analogies that are used. So I'm telling you this, and you yourself acknowledge that whenever you use that analogy to an Israeli or a Jew, they don't get it or they get defensive. Well, that is a sign that it's just not the right approach. So I'm saying this as a reflection. I'm giving this as a reflection. I think there's many ways to explain to Israelis why, given the amount of power they have, that they should take more responsibility. I think that message can get across. I don't think this is the best way to convey it, but I'm very happy to move past this. I do want to talk about how you think what actions Israel can take to ensure Jewish safety on the land.
Sure. Now, the question of the safety, I hear you about the conveying. It's always something we learn, and everybody, of course, it's something we can, it's not a law, something we should always do.
We're always improving every day. You know, that's what we're here to do.
In regards to safety, okay, it's a question on an Israeli mind. To me, to the public, and to Palestinians and non-Palestinians, except for the Israelis, This is the wrong question. The question should be, what would ensure safety to everybody here? Not to Israel or Israelis only or mainly or first or foremost. Maybe you're not saying that, but that's how it comes across. So this is firstly how we should ask the question. Equality. Simple. One state. Everybody living in equality. Why would somebody kill somebody else when they're equally treated and well treated and have an economy and sovereignty and hope and self-determination and their acquirements or requirements or aspirations met? Why? Does it happen still? Yes, it happens still, because there is a trauma and generations of hurt and wounds and killing. And yes, it might still happen, but that's part of the process. The question is wrong to say we should guarantee perfect safety. This is all wrong. There's no safety. A human race means issues, and the human race living together means also amazing stuff. Issues and amazing stuff, that's how we should cherish humanity living in relationship, especially with ex-enemies, if we assume that we moved ahead suddenly with a solution. Suddenly. We are ex-enemies, if we assume this scenario. We're still enemies now, but I'm assuming we just moved. We're ex-enemies. You just killed my daughter. I just killed your brother. My mother just killed. Of course there is hurt and wounds, and some people might still take revenge and do crazy stuff. We move ahead with a better system, and we try to better that system without trying to focus on one people group having more safety or less safety than the other. Rather, everybody having safety and working on it. And with time, we acquire complete, not complete as in perfect, as in a healthier system of safety. This is the answer. It's very simple. Again, this is how I see it.
So the idealist in me agrees with you that there's no solution better than us living in a one-state solution as equal brothers and sisters. Let's do it. The realist in me struggles with that. Not that I don't want it. I just don't know how viable it is now. Can we get there within a few generations? Perhaps. But to think that just doing a one-state solution, one government, equality across the board would lead to peace, to me, isn't really looking at the will of the people. It's true, the majority of both sides want to keep the land whole, but they're not interested in a binational state. The majority of Palestinians want a Palestinian state. Many Palestinians are not shy in their aspiration to kick Jews off the land once they are the powerful ones. So it's not even that you have a majority of Palestinians saying, yeah, let's just live in peace and we'll all be friends and brothers and sisters. That's not even what the conversation is about. It is, we will continue to resist until we are the powerful ones, and then we will remove Jews from the land. This is being said by Palestinians, both Palestinians in power, to your basic farmer, right? This is not a novel opinion in Palestinian society. So to think that after 100 years of conflict, we can just go to a system where we're competing for control over one government and that it won't lead to violence, I just don't think that's how it's going to play out. I think that the result of this binational state in the short term will lead to more bloodshed than we've actually seen the past 100 years. So if our goal is to reduce violence, I think this is probably one of the worst ways to achieve that. And I think the status quo, as horrible as it is preferred to that. So, you know, I'm happy for you to make the case that why you think many Palestinians will change their mind about living as equals with Jews when currently all the polling shows that that's not what they want. There's also, Corey Gill-Schuster, and I know that this is anecdotal because it's not official polling, but Corey Gill-Schuster has an awesome YouTube channel where he'll go around asking Israelis and Palestinians different questions. And he's, a left-wing Israeli. He doesn't cut out certain interviews. He shows everything he films, and he's done a few where he asks, will you live with Jews if you're the powerful one? And overwhelmingly they say no, we will not. Then they say Jews can live here as guests, but they can't be our equals. And many say no, we will kick them out or we will get revenge. So this is a very common narrative amongst Palestinian society, and to think this will just change overnight the second we're all equal, I don't think that's grounded in reality. While I'd like to find a way in which we could all live in one state as equal citizens, I don't see it happening in the foreseeable future, and that's why I lean more towards like a federated system where there's more than one government, or even a two-state solution, which seems to be dying day by day. But the binational state with one government just seems to be maybe the worst solution out of all of them, as much as the idealist in me wants that.
I hear you, Adar. I hear you. I wasn't necessarily proposing the political solution. I was proposing the humanitarian solution. Doesn't mean we have to have a binational state with this equal rights living together. No, can be two state, can be federation, can be. I'm just presenting the principles, the humanitarian principles of equal rights, no abuse of freedom of movement, no destroying, demolition of houses, taking over more land, building illegal settlements, kicking out Palestinians, no more abuse. This is what I'm promoting would bring about definitely a more possible, hopeful Palestinians living in peace. You're saying that majority of Palestinians would say this and that. Majority of Israelis would say that even worse. If we take people's words and based on that evaluate and measure how we stop abusing and killing, which is way more important to stop killing than measuring words and verbal opinions of both groups, we're just, again, sorry to use the word, being shallow. And by the way, Israelis are the most people on, not only, but mainly, are almost around the main, almost only, but those with Israel, also pro-Israel, would agree. They almost always don't find a solution to the conflict. They say, no, it's status quo, maybe it's better than. Whereas the victims, who wants more solution? The ones who are suffering more or the ones who are oppressing more? In life, who wants more of a solution? The one who's stealing from somebody's bank account or the one whose bank account is being stolen from? Of course, the one who has the bank account being stolen from wants a stop to that. The thief who takes more land or takes more money is not very interested.
I think this is a good analogy, Malkon. So I support this analogy right here.
I'm using an analogy. Yes.
I like it.
Israel, to us, stands as a thief, and we are the stolen from. Who is more interested to solve the conflict? Of course, the ones who are stolen from, regardless of their verbal opinions here and there by somebody asking them or not asking them. Palestinians are humans. If you don't abuse a human psychologically, why would they suddenly say, oh, let me get kicked out my Jewish neighbor a few decades after when we have complete peace and power? I just will be so hungry for aggression that it's very illogical emotionally. Even if it's verbally said, it's nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. That's why scholars don't present such agenda. It's Israelis who present such agenda, because this is an Israeli way of convincing the world. Oh no, listen, this we have, maybe the status quo is better than we Jews maybe will be thrown into the sea. Again, the manipulation of Jews being still the victims. So this is what we're addressing from the very beginning until now.
Yeah, I mean, but in all fairness, Israelis are painting a picture because they're taking Palestinians' words at face value instead of just assuming that their words are a result of the current situation and that they're not only words but thoughts will change given peace. And that might be the fact, but can you blame Israelis for hearing what Palestinians are saying and believing them, given the history between us, right? So I think that's quite understandable.
Vice versa,
yeah, for sure.
Also here, Israelis. But I'm trying to say words are not our measurement tools as the main measurement. That's, again, it's a shallow approach. If we want to be scientific, if we want to be psychologically correct, we need data of how people evolve and survive in apartheid system, different places where occupation ended, where we study how people evolved into a better place, and then we evaluate them. And then I'll not say, oh, but here Palestinians are saying horrible things. And Israelis are saying even more horrible things. So,
but Malcolm, the data we have is not good, though. It's like, okay, let's take South Africa as an example. How whites are treated in South Africa is not giving Jews any confidence that their lives will be good living on the land.
Okay, tell me more. Elaborate.
Well, you literally have white people leaving South Africa, being murdered, being killed, as retaliation from things that happened decades ago. And
Okay.
I would actually say the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians is even more deep rooted and more violent than what we had, what existed in South Africa. So it's not like you have all this clear data that the second an ethnic conflict ends and you have equality across the board, then there's peace. That's not what the data shows us. So I we could hear what Palestinians are saying and take that at face value, or we could look at other data and neither of those paint a rosy picture. So we're still left in the situation where most Israelis will ensure the status quo, because that just means, yeah, we'll have maybe a dozen Jews die a year, but at least it's not hundreds or thousands. And again, the status quo ultimately could lead to thousands of Jews dying a year. There's no guarantee that won't happen, but we feel safer in this situation rather than the unknown, which could lead to something far worse. And that's why I think the status quo maintains, and why there's, by and large, overwhelming support for the status quo. It doesn't come from a hate for Palestinians. It comes from a fear of Palestinians and a fear of the unknown.
Another analogy, Adar, although you don't dislike it so much. This is by the way, I'm not speaking only with
I like some analogies. Hit me.
I'm speaking with the public. No, this analogy you don't like because I already mentioned it.
Okay.
But another analogy, somebody who's been stealing from me his whole life, and once they apologize and bring me back something or just whatever, it doesn't mean that I feel amazing towards them. Doesn't mean I will treat them amazingly afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
This is a consequence of somebody who hurt others for generations. Now the question is, does the thief want their conscience to be a human again as more important, or they want their own survival or money or possessions or power as more important at the expense of being a criminal and killing the other part and controlling them all the time? What is more important, Adar? To raise Jewish life as you're raising it, as if it's more important, more valuable than Palestinian life, in the questions you're raising, because you want to represent the Israelis. And by the way, I'll tell you openly, you're misrepresenting or representing the wrong side. Because you shouldn't be representing Israelis if you're Israeli. You should be representing justice if you're a man of justice. This is what, for me, any man of integrity should be representing and calling out for. I do not represent Palestinians because I'm a Palestinian. By the way, I'm the least Palestinian by origin. I was born in Palestine, my father in Syria, my mother in Egypt, my grandmother in Eastern Turkey, historic Armenia. I'm a Palestinian by birth in belonging. I represent Palestinians because they carry the call for justice. Not because they are perfect human beings. I will also criticize, and I openly criticize Palestinians when they do injustice. They do injustice against me. So we have a big Palestinian struggle. Me talking to you might be seen as normalization by some Palestinians. It's abusive to me. It's a Palestinian abuse coming from this BDS culture that's misunderstood by some and abusive to each other. So away from that, I'm speaking now to, and as I represent justice here, or I hope, I aspire to represent justice, not to represent a certain people group. So I do call of you as a friend, as a brother online, to represent justice, not the Israelis. Israeli lives are equal to everybody else. They're not more important. What they have done harm to somebody else, if they want to recover and reconcile from that, they might face consequences. But it's way better off than staying as a criminal and justifying being criminal and losing their humane identity and continue to oppress others under the name, oh, what I want survival. What do you mean? Is that your purpose of life, to be surviving instead of living for others? This is selfishness and self-centeredness. When I ask about my life, rather, I need to live for others and for the sake of others. And this is what the person we spoke about in the beginning did. And we addressed him because he was living for others, Jesus Christ. And he died for others. He didn't live for himself or his own aspiration. And that's the theological question that you raised again. He died so that others may live. The same way Any human, I believe, if they live for others, then we would have a way better place than if everybody would just only try to live for themselves. I'm speaking this to Palestinians first before I speak it to Israelis. But unfortunately, the Israelis are way more responsible of crime here and abuse, very sad, than Palestinians. So, but I say to my own people, first, if we want to be not hypocritical and we want to call for justice, then also I tell my people when they're racist against Jews for being Jews, even when they're not Zionists, tell them, hey, are you aware that it's not about that? And then they don't like it. That's a struggle. Victims get into their own self-centered mode. But unfortunately, Palestinians are victims daily. They're slapped on daily basis. Whereas Jews here are not slapped on daily basis. And if they're slapped by their own actions that they are initiating, and they're facing the reaction based on that from Palestine. I'm not speaking about every single Israeli. I'm speaking, there's many innocent who didn't initiate, but I'm speaking about the system and the regime that initiates abuse and gets a setback from Palestinians. That doesn't justify Palestinian abuse of Israelis, rather the opposite. It holds them responsible, from my opinion. But if I call an Israeli person like you are trying to educate me or teach me or guide me or help me or advise me or recommend me a different way of speaking an analogy to an Israeli, by the way, my purpose is not to convince an Israeli of my point of view. Conviction is really freedom, one's own freedom. All I could do is present my heart, and you present your heart, and maybe we can influence ourselves into the better principles of life. But I cannot come and convince you of a certain opinion, and you convince me of a certain opinion because we want to convince each other. We present each other's ideas. I'm convinced of that analogy. If someone else is not convinced of that analogy, maybe it's because they don't want to be convinced. They're not open because they are on the defensive still. And that's another layer of being held responsible for refusing analogies that represent more the reality on the ground. But that's not the main argument, analogies. I'm using it as a metaphor to explain the level of our emotional responsibility into everything I'm saying. I hope I'm being clear. But my purest call would be, as we end this conversation, whenever you want to end, is to call for justice, not to call for each other to represent their own people mainly. That's legitimate at times. But first, to call for justice. That can unify us. Justice, and not whatever the words of to do with peace that comes across very, very nashy, or whatever human rights that comes across as if it addresses certain people and as if makes us equal in responsibility. But justice that is based on the truth.
Thank you. So we'll take some questions before we wrap it up. I am going to respond, but I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. We will prioritize super chats for those who want to contribute to the show. So I actually don't think my goal is to represent the Israeli side. I actually think I am here. The whole goal of this channel is to aid in the reconciliation between both people. If I were to speak today with not a Palestinian, but an Israeli, and he were representing the Israeli side, that would cause me to represent the Palestinian side. I recognize that in order for us to reconcile, we need a greater understanding and greater empathy of one another. So when I speak for Israelis, I'm speaking for Israelis because I understand that in order to move forward, we need to understand the Israeli perspective. We need to understand their fears, their concerns, and their aspirations. Same goes with the Palestinians. So I will always represent the side that is not being represented, and that is my way of supporting reconciliation and justice. So I think it's just a different, maybe we have different approaches of how we go about it. But it's important to note that that is my goal here. And for those who have seen other discussions, I've debated Israeli settlers and other Israelis, and I take more of the Palestinian side because they're not being represented. And that's what my commitment is to truth, to reconciliation, and to improving the lives of all inhabitants of the land of Israel and Palestine. And with that, unless you have a remark on that, or we could go to the comments.
No, I agree with that. It has, I'm saying it has legitimacy, Adar. I'm not denying that you should be represented, but it's the level, it's the way, it's how critical you present it. You didn't present it in a critical manner. You present it as if it's a major theme. Yes, you should say this is to Israelis, but I don't see it. I don't really fully agree, but I have to represent my people. This is more or less would show better if you are being in that side of okay, I have responsibility here to present some people's opinion, but I criticize that. I'm critical, but if you're not critical, then that's what I'm critical of. That you're not critical of saying, but the safety of Israelis.
So anybody, if anybody's tuning in for the first time, by the way, if you're tuning in for the first time, hit that subscribe button. We're about to hit 9K subscribers, so let's do it. But if you're tuning in for the first time, yeah, maybe that's a perception you might have because I haven't given much critique of Israel. If you watch other streams, you'll see I focus on major critiques. But I am happy to leave it with, I asked you what you think we can do to change the status quo that would keep Jews safe. So I actually have a whole bunch of ideas that I've shared before. I don't think this is all the solution, but I think there's a lot we could do to reduce the conflict, to stop the radicalization of both sides, and I'm happy to share those. I think, first of all, a lot of it comes down to education. I think and again, I have a lot to say about the Palestinian side, but I will focus on the Israeli side just so you and any other new viewers can understand that there's a level of intentionality here with how we approach this, and that we are solution oriented. And it's not just about defending or presenting a side. It's really about both sides acknowledging what they can do differently. So what can the Israelis do? Well, we should have an education system that is producing children that are peace oriented, right? So we have a very militaristic culture, a culture that focuses on pride for our military. And it's understandable why we have that, because our military has kept us alive on this land. But we should respect and honor those attempting to achieve peace just as much as we honor and respect our soldiers. We should learn about the Palestinian narrative. We should be learning Arabic. We should learn means of conversation and reconciliation so that every Israeli can themselves be involved in the peace process. We should stop expansion of settlements immediately. We should replace the military, and this is expensive, but I think it's important. We should replace the military with the civilian police force in the occupied territories, highly trained civilian force that are fluent in Arabic and treat Palestinians with respect. And when there's an abuse of power, they're held accountable. Today, there's very little accountability for abuse of power. And I'd say that that's a pretty good base. If we could do that, then we could really take a lot of the tension off, and start to reach common ground, and then just get back to the negotiating table. I think we should stop demolishing homes. I think we should stop arresting children. I think in general, soldiers shouldn't be interacting with children, right? So there's so much we could do that we're not doing. And I'm just one person. I'm not a genius. I'm not even an expert on this. I've just put a fair amount of thought. I've had a fair bit of conversations. I think the collective brilliance of the people living in Israel can come up with a lot more ideas. And I give this just as an example of how little we're currently doing when we could do so much more. And I'll leave it with that. We have and Malkon, if you want to now take the torch and share what you think Palestinians could do differently, then I'm sure people would love to hear that. Are you frozen? Malkon's frozen. We'll take some questions. Maybe Malkon will unfreeze in the meantime. Eve is asking, are Israeli Arabs who live in West Bank labeled as settlers too? I imagine they would not be labeled as such. Don, I'm happy to ask the question of if Malkon believes the Jews are Khazars or not. Oh, and it's just me. Wait, hold on. He sent me a voice message. Hold on.
Brother, something happened with my internet. Allow me a few seconds.
So he's having internet issues. He's trying to come back on. I'll be happy to address whatever questions we have in the meantime. So NH is asking that missed the beginning. Do we need to apologize for killing Jesus? He didn't so much say apologize as much as just acknowledge that Jews were involved in that, and he himself acknowledges that it was a few Jewish leaders that turned Jesus over to the Romans, and that's in consensus with historians as well. So that's not controversial. So controversial. So yeah, or I saw you say this about that he's sharing falsehoods about Jesus, but I agree with you on the point that I don't think it's really relevant today. I think we could put it behind us, and most Christians I think don't care for that acknowledgement or wrongdoing. I think Malkon being in an interesting situation where he's both Christian and Palestinian, Jewish contribution to his pain is something that goes beyond just his existence as a Palestinian. So I feel like there's like a compounding effect, and maybe that's why it's still important to him. But generally speaking, I don't think it's important. But if you do look at the historical consensus, not only theological consensus but historical consensus, it's not a trope. You had Jewish leaders turn Jesus into the Romans, and they crucified him. And I don't think that's controversial to acknowledge. I think what's extremely controversial is to think that Jews should be punished for that, but that was not Malkon's claim. Malkon, welcome back.
Thank you.
So we have, yeah,
continue.
I was just chit-chatting, but I shared what I think Israel can do. Do you want to end it by sharing what you think Palestinians can do to bring us closer to peace?
Yeah, first, for me, I believe Palestinians should be open for connection with those who are open to solve the conflict, not to boycott the connection, the discussion that we are doing now, for example. That some people may boycott or believe boycotting, and that some don't believe in boycott, but some believe. Also, the hypocrisy that we have around culture of hypocrisy around human rights and justice. On one hand, we want the end of the occupation. On the other hand, we wish to live in Israel and under Israel and through Israel and by Israel. And we have a lot of hypocrisy, which is understandable, not justified, but understandable where it comes from. It's another discussion for those who don't understand what I mean, not because of your lack of intelligence, it's because of my lack of clarity about what that means. So we have a lot of hypocrisy to address and to change. It's an endless list to go. But to keep seeking, I believe in short, to keep seeking a peaceful resistance despite any abusive, aggressive policies of racism by Israel, still to resist by peaceful means, for me, I think is key towards a solution one day, regardless of the form and the shape of the solution. But a solution towards at least ending the abuse of Palestinian people and then also Israelis. But the end of the suffering, the occupation, and the colonization system. This is, in short, what I think. But it's lengthy. I don't want to get longer. We already stayed longer. But yeah, thank you.
So you're calling for an end to violence, and I think that's very, very much appreciated. I think that goes a long way in the hearts and minds of many Jews. So thank you. We're going to wrap it up, but for those who want to continue, I'm going to post. We could do an after party in Discord. I won't have time, but Malkon, if you want to join, I'm sure some of the community would like to talk to you. If not, the community is just welcome to join. I just shared a link to Discord. You click Discord on the left-hand side. you'll see it says lounge, click lounge, and then you're connected to a little voice chat and everyone can engage, ask questions and whatnot. Next week, I'm going to have a conversation, not on Israel, Palestine, with a friend named Coda, who was trans and then detransitioned, which is interesting yet controversial topic. So I'm going to have a conversation with him. And yeah, and Or and I are having a little back and forth here, saying according to historical consensus, there's no evidence for the existence of Jesus. I actually researched this last night to prepare for this, and I think you're mistaken, brother. But if you want to come on and have a conversation about this, we can. But before so, I would say do the research, because it sounds like it is not just theological, but also historical consensus at this point. But reach out if you want to come on to talk about it. Malkon, thank you so much. Viewers, thank you so much. And I'll see you next week. Much love.
Thank you, Adar. So we don't have time for questions, answers, right? Is that what you're saying?
There just weren't too many questions, but I think people would like to. But Malkon, if you want to join Discord, you're already in the server. If you want to join Discord, I'm sure the community would love to speak to you.
Okay, of course.
So go to Discord, join the lounge, and the party continues.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Bye bye.